Is this a different meeting or the same meeting?
Different, I think.
All right. Hey, y'all. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Thanks for folks for hanging in there with us. All of your hosts were sitting on a different link. So we apologize for the delay, and thank you all for being here. This speaks to the wonderful fun that we all get to deal with in this new world of COVID and using virtual spaces. And we're not modeling very good virtual practices here as your hosts were in the wrong link. So we appreciate you all waiting it out for a few minutes. And we're about to go ahead and get started then, because we got a lot to get through in the next 50 minutes. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen, but maybe before we get started, we'll introduce ourselves here in a second. Our hosts today, though, I'm Jared Cates. We have Matt Neese with CFSA and Michelle Osborne from RAFI. We'll do some more introductions here in a sec, but I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen so you all can see these slides. All right, everyone. So before we start, this should have been something you saw while you were waiting for us. But so if you want to chat us at all, we're going to save our questions for the end. I'm going to be recording this, so just know that this is being recorded, and we're going to try and use this as a resource to share to anyone moving forward who potentially wants to host candidate forums. So we're going to spend some time answering questions in the chat, and then we'll have about 10 minutes at the end where we answer questions at the end. So welcome. Thank you for joining us for How to Host Nonpartisan Virtual Candidates Forums. This is the second of 2 sessions where we've hosted webinars to cover the same material. And our hosts today, as I mentioned, are Community Food Strategies, Carolina Farm Stewardship Association, and Rural Advancement Foundation International USA. So our agenda, we're going to go through a quick welcome, show you some desired outcomes that we want you all to get out of our webinar. We're going to go through a candidates forum toolkit developed by Community Food Strategies. We're going to talk about hosting food forums that don't necessarily have candidates in them, and then we're going to have some time to answer your questions. So real quick, Community Food Strategies is a team of food system experts with members based at 7 organizations in North Carolina. We primarily serve a network of 36 independent community-based food councils across the state by working to inspire connections and amplify collective action so that community voices are heard and food policy shifts towards more equitable outcomes. So the initiative really works collaboratively to help build an equitable, community-driven food system that improves the quality of life for all people. And I'm a member of that team, and you can see the team members there and the different organizations that make up this collaboration, which includes CEFS, the Center for Environmental Farming Systems, Appalachian Sustainable Agriculture Project, North Carolina Rural Center, Carolina Farm Stewardship Association, CFSA, Kindred Seedlings Farm, Food Bank of Central and Eastern North Carolina, Care Share Health Alliance, and CORE at the Center for Environmental Farming Systems. So this is the group presenting us today with these partners. Matt, you want to introduce CFSA?
Sure. Well, like I said, thanks everyone for hanging in there and waiting on us. We're happy to be here. Thank you all for giving us your time today. CFSA, I'm the South Carolina Policy Coordinator, so I cover advocacy efforts here in South Carolina. So shout out to any SC folks who are on this webinar. For those who aren't aware, CFSA, our mission is to help people in the Carolinas grow and eat local food by advocating for fair farm and food policies, building the systems that organic family farms need to thrive, and then educating communities about the benefits of local organic farming. So essentially, we represent small and mid-sized local farms throughout both North and South Carolina. We've got a little over 3,000 members. And so we are divided up essentially into 2 different kind of arms here at CFSA. Jared and I work on the advocacy side. So we work with local policy, state policy, federal policy. We work on, at least I'm a lobbyist at the South Carolina State House. So I'm over there trying to fight for the voice for small and mid-sized farms. So that's more the advocacy side of things that we work on. Then we've also got our farm services team, and our farm services team does an amazing job of doing on-site technical support for farms. They help with gap audits, organic certifications, high tunnel consulting. If our member farms need help, our folks will go out and give them a hand. So it's kind of a catch-all. We do a lot here at CFSA. These webinars are just one of the latest attempts to mobilize folks in the community to advocate for change in the world of small scale agriculture and local food systems. So we're happy to be here.
Nice. Thanks, Matt. Lisa unfortunately cannot be here with us today, but Michelle, would you like to introduce yourself and RAFI, please?
Sure, yeah. So RAFI, we're based in Pittsburgh, but we work throughout the state, throughout North Carolina. And so our mission is to cultivate markets, policies, and communities that support thriving, socially just, and environmentally sound family farms. We do this through several different programs. So we have a farm advocacy program where we work with farmers in financial crisis. We support farmers markets to be able to accept SNAP. We work with churches that have food ministries. We also work with contract poultry growers, and we have a Farmers of Color network as well. So we do a lot of different work around the farm advocacy and farm policy world.
Awesome. Thank you all. We're excited to partner together for these series of webinars. And, community strategies, so I have a dual role where I work at CFSA and serve our membership, and then I, work for Community Strategies interagency team. And the team of Community Strategies really works to support and develop North Carolina's food councils through, trainings, tools, and structured network building. And this is a semi-up-to-date map of the network of 36 food councils in North Carolina. And CFSA is part of the Community Strategies effort, and through my work on that team. And this webinar is an example of this type of collaboration amongst Community Strategies and team partners and other organizations like RAFI. But that's also why a lot of the language over here today is kind of centered around food councils as the main host of these events. But any organization can host a candidates forum in a nonpartisan way and do that around food. And anyone can follow these steps that we've laid out to plan a forum and have candidates feel excited and do it in a way where both the community and candidates are educated and some positive results come out of it. So you'll hear a lot of food council language, but that doesn't mean that you have to be a food council to host these. CFSA also serves our members in South Carolina where Matt works, and this is kind of a semi-up-to-date map of food councils in South Carolina. And there's a growing network of food councils in South Carolina and new state level support for communities interested in forming their own food councils. So if you're in South Carolina and interested in doing this work, you don't have to be a food council, but if you're interested in learning more about food councils, there are some resources out there to engage with. So please contact Matt if you'd like to know more. So I'm going to go, so our desired outcomes for today, we really hope that you all, food councils, community groups, learn about the tools that are out there to support you all in planning and hosting in-person as well as virtual food themes candidates forums. And we hope that food councils and community groups are interested in hosting their own local virtual forums in fall 2020. And I say that because RAFI, CFSA, North Carolina Rural Center, Moms Rising, North Carolina Alliance for Health, Feeding the Carolinas, several other partners are planning now for state level and federal level virtual forums in North Carolina in September. And so we are interested to partner with any local groups who are going to host, who are interested in hosting their own local forums. We would love to feature a series of food themed forums around the state this fall. So if you're in North Carolina, if after hearing this you want to host your own event, please reach out to, or South Carolina, please reach out to Matt and myself. We'd love to chat with you about those opportunities. And I think church groups too, anyone else, if you're interested in hosting this type of event, you want to learn more, we're all available after this call to have a one-on-one meeting with you all. So we're going to get into this toolkit, which was developed by Community Strategies first in 2016 and then revised in 2017. And it was specifically developed to support the network of food councils in North Carolina and hosting candidates forums in 2016 during the 2016 election year. So I'm gonna go for a second to that website to show you a little bit of it. But first, why would you host a food themed candidate forum? First of all, it gives a space for your community to discuss pertinent issues related to food, health, and agriculture. It's just a platform to have those types of conversations. The intersections between health and agriculture and talking about it anywhere, it's a good opportunity. Second, it really educates key decision makers about your community's concerns and needs related to those issues. It creates a space for your community to talk about what their needs and concerns are around health and agriculture. They also help decision makers to see you, your local council, your local organization, as an expert on these issues and someone that they can go to as a resource as they're trying to make policy or, understand, what's happening. It helps you be seen as a resource when you are hosting events like this. And through that, it helps you, build and strengthen relationships with both the community and with the people who have the power to make decisions in local government. We've seen tons of relationships be developed with food councils after they've hosted these and had lawmakers reaching out directly to food councils for advice. And that's the thing, it creates a pathway that you can really work with those folks in office to improve policies, practices, and public investment in your local food system. So it does everything from the grassroots up to, building relationships with power brokers to, get some stuff done. So I'm gonna exit out for a second and I'm gonna go and show you this toolkit and where it lives. And maybe Matt, if you could drop the link in the chat. But this is the toolkit. It's a website. It's a form on our website. And if you click here, it goes to the toolkit PDF, which we're going to walk through a bit of it in a second. I'm going to walk through some of it. Matt's going to walk through some of it. And then it has this video, which we're going to watch first. And then it has this worksheet. Before we watch the video, I'm going to show you all this worksheet because this is really a tool that is really helpful once you get into your planning. And I'm going to walk through, timeline and what you need to think about when planning a forum. But this worksheet can be really helpful as you're sitting down and planning it out. Who's part of your planning committee? What's your format you're selecting? What are your ground rules? What are you going to track and evaluate as metrics of success? Who are your partners? Your agenda? Who's going to do your logistics? What are the options? Who's going to call them? What is your budget? Who are your guests? What are their contact information? What are your questions? How are you going to promote it? Who are some stakeholders you're going to invite? And who are some volunteers? So we're going to walk through a bit of that, but this is a template where you can kind of enter in all that information as you plan, so you have a cohesive planning document to share with your planning partners. And then we have templates in here, appendixes, which are a sample co-sponsor agreement form, sample guest invitations for your candidates, sample press release and save the dates, sample social media messages, sample event evaluation, and then sample thank you letters. So we really created these so that you could copy and paste them during your planning and afterwards and adjust it for your specific event. So I just want to note that this is a strong tool that you can use in your planning, and hopefully it's helpful. So those are templates. Those are kind of a planning worksheet. And I'm going to show this video now, which is about 5 minutes, which kind of talks through the experience of several food councils hosting these events in 2016. And hopefully my sound plays. So fellow hosts, let me know if the sound is not working for some reason, but hopefully it will.
North Carolina cares about food and farm issues. And we're calling on our candidates to care about it too. That's why we wanted to put together this candidate forum so our candidates can know that our residents care about it. But we're actually about to get this event started very soon.
This year, with a big presidential election, we haven't seen at the national level really any discussion about the challenges that our country faces with food waste, with food insecurity, with agricultural production. Food councils really saw this as an opportunity to create spaces to have that conversation and to bring that conversation more to the forefront in their local communities and let their elected officials and candidates know that even though this isn't a topic that's trending necessarily nationally during this election season, it's something that's important to their constituents, something that's important to their communities, and it helps those elected officials know that these are issues that people care about, and they're going to need to work on them if they get elected into office.
Food stamps and get
Folks are really receptive, really excited that there's something like this going on, and definitely interested to hear what our candidates have to say about this topic. This is something that doesn't come up as much as we'd like in some of the national debates, so getting to hear candidates talk about it, people are pretty excited.
We're a fairly new council, and we needed a way to connect with both the community and with policymakers in Durham to get our name out there to make sure they knew who we were and what we were working on.
Charlotte-Mecklenburg Food Policy Council decided to host the Candidates Forum today because we feel like it's really important for people to have information about issues around the food system.
The Alamance Food Collaborative decided to host this meet and greet candidate forum because we were wrapping up a strategic planning process that we've been working on for the last year. We thought it would be a wonderful way to engage our elected officials and those running for office around a discussion of food, using the plan as the catalyst for that conversation.
One of the questions we had for the candidates was how they were going to improve access to healthy foods in the school system. What we have learned is our school has done a lot of things. It made a lot of healthy changes, a lot that we did not know about. It was a good place to have the conversation about healthy food in the schools because the candidates help make that reality, right? So being able to present the plan to them, to have those conversations, plants that seed.
For this event, we prepared 3 sheets that help us outline the kinds of issues we're really interested in working on. One is about school foods and thinking about how to bring that into gardens or into the classrooms or into the cafeterias. The other issue that we're really highlighting is food access in general, and so we had a presentation by Kathy Metzo to talk about our State of the Plate assessment that we completed last year. And finally, we're also looking at the food infrastructure in Charlotte. So some candidates are very enthusiastic and weren't able to attend, even though they had interest in food issues. So it gave us a chance to connect with them and really talk about what we can do in the future and work with them.
Our partners today included CFSA, that's Carolina Farm Stewardship Association, and Community Food Strategies. They've been working with food councils around the state to bring candidates forums, but also to help us network with each other, learn lessons from each other, help us figure out sort of what policy objectives make sense in our local areas, and give us the tools that we need to be successful.
Locally, we had a couple of people who are really important for us. The Community Culinary School of Charlotte was fantastic in providing the food for this morning, and some of the other local organizations have been helpful in just helping to get the word out and sharing it on Facebook or through their own social networks. It's a lot to put together, but I had a good team. One of the things I'll do in the future is think about how to delegate a bit more, and some of that has to do with starting a bit earlier.
The Durham Farm and Food Network would be really excited to host an event like this again. I think in part because this is a terrific way to get policymakers talking about the issues that we care about.
There's no perfect time to do this type of work because it's a fluid process, and engaging people around this conversation is not something that happens just one time. It has to occur on an ongoing basis. And so I would encourage communities to not be afraid to go ahead and do something like this, because it's really just about starting a conversation.
So these councils are creating the space that bring together different sectors that are working on different policies that affect all these issues. So they're really the perfect organization to create a community space where folks are coming together, talking with their elected officials, learning what candidates feel about these important food, farming, and agricultural issues, and creating a dialogue that can hopefully then lead to some collaboration and potentially some policy change that might improve our community's food systems.
All right. So I just want to say, wow, 2016 feels like so long ago. And watching that video, the 2 things come to mind, like, oh, I miss being around people, and boy, I had a really unfortunate mustache. So obviously things are different now. It's harder to create the space of community in these types of events because you are not in person. You can't be sitting next to each other. We're hosting events that are online where people are already burned out on online interactions. So we acknowledge that, and we acknowledge it's different, and we acknowledge that it really is a different event. You're not in person. You're not going to be able to connect, to create the deeper relationships that you can as in an in-person event. But you can do some things to create a dialogue around food, farming, and health. And you can do that in a way that brings community in and features candidates and creates a community dialogue and helps the community understand where candidates sit on these types of issues. So we just want to acknowledge that. But thanks for watching that video. And folks in 2016 really got a lot of benefit out of hosting those events and the work that came after it. So I'm going to show you a little bit of this worksheet, the toolkit. I'm going to go through some of it and then hand it off to Matt. This is the table of contents that you'll find. It's really, planning the forum, day of the event, and following. But what do candidates and elected officials want? They want to know who is hosting this event. They want to know what the type of exposure they're going to get, and they're going to want to know, the format of the event and how much at risk are they going to be put. How much on the cuff speaking they're going to have to do, how much is going to be really planned out. These are all things that they're going to keep in mind as they're deciding if they're going to be a part of your event. So it's important to let candidates know, who you are, what your network is, so they understand how many constituents can be there. They want to know who else is going to be at the event. So what other officials are you inviting? Is it all for the same office? Is it different offices? Are you going to be asking, different questions to different offices in different ways? So the more that you can let the folks know up front as you invite them, the more comfortable they are going to feel with saying yes and then following through with that commitment. So, when you're in person, you really want to have as many people come out as you can. And when you're doing this virtually, you want to be able to say, we're going to have at least over 100 people attend this online or something like that. Something that will encourage them to be part of it because they understand that they're speaking to a larger crowd. And that's really what candidates, running for office want. They're maxed on time. During a normal season, they're going from place to place to place in person to stump. And that can be overwhelming. So they want to know that they're kind of getting the best bang for their buck. So it's a little different now when it's this virtual space. Candidates might have a little more time, and it's less travel and stress on them to participate. But you just want to know that they want exposure, and by saying who will be there and the networks that have been invited, you can help them understand who will be there. So getting to that, preparing candidates for the format and how the questions are going to be laid out. You really want to maintain a nonpartisan space. It's necessary by law for 501c3 organizations, but it also really guarantees a sense of neutrality that will encourage your guests to participate and will also get more interest from the media because people see that it's an open forum that is nonpartisan and not being skewed in any direction. So you really want to, you want to invite you can set your own parameters for who you invite. Typically, in the past, we have set the parameters of anyone who has a public-facing website that is running for office that we are easily able to find their contact information for. We are inviting all those people who are running for that one office. You need to write that down in your planning and say, the folks who didn't have a public website, why they didn't get the invitation. It's because you couldn't get in contact with them. So you really need to be inviting all viable candidates that's running for that office and making the equal effort to contact with them. But if you don't have their contact information, you can say that up front. We didn't invite people who we didn't have contact information for. We had a deadline of X date for people to respond to, and that's how we're going to be moving forward with who got invited. You really need to invite all, if one candidate confirms and another candidate declines, you can still go ahead with the event, having the one candidate because you invited both candidates. You want to make sure that you're giving them ample opportunity to confirm. So send out a reminder, let them know the date of your deadline to confirm. You also need to let folks know at the opening of your event that just the fact that the one person is there, the other person isn't there, it does not equal an endorsement of that one candidate by your group, and that you did invite everyone to be there. We're going to get into a little bit further on about questions and how to keep your questions nonpartisan. But really, you should give everyone equal time, and you should not be asking candidates to disagree or agree on specific positions, platforms, or the platforms of positions of sponsoring organizations, or on specific legislation. The questions should be broader and cover a multitude of issues. Within the food system, you can cover a whole broad range of issues within the food system. And having a moderator that is neutral is very important. Someone who's perceived as neutral and not aligned with the host or in any political position, that really helps to portray that you're maintaining our nonpartisan space and encouraging nonpartisan discussion. So those are just a few tips on maintaining nonpartisan space. When you're thinking about planning, we recommend for an in-person forum, really taking 4 months to plan. We're in a different space, obviously, because you don't have to, if you're doing a virtual forum, you're not finding a physical space, you're not thinking about lots of volunteers to help manage that physical space, you're probably not doing food. So you're gonna have less planning time on the front end because you're gonna have different logistics. But what we recommend you do is form a committee from your group that will specifically work on this task. And then you go down these steps of selecting your format of your agenda, creating your ground rules, figuring out how you're going to track success, identifying any partners, coordinating your logistics, developing a budget if you need one, inviting your guests, preparing your questions, developing your promotion strategy, and then recruiting volunteers. And then 1 month before the event, you want to follow up with all your guests, make sure they don't have any questions, do another round of promotions, and make sure all your logistics are in place. And in this new virtual space, logistics are being on top of your technology, which we did not model very well today. So testing your Zoom link, setting, if you're not using Zoom, figuring out what other platform you're going to use, making sure that all your virtual ducks are in a row before you launch your forum. So in a typical situation in person, these are the 4 roles that we suggest for your planning committee. This might be different because there are different, maybe not as many roles to be filled, but we suggest specifically, designate someone to coordinate logistics, someone doing promotions and media, someone specifically assigned to just work with your guests, to invite the moderator, invite your candidates, stay engaged with them before the guest, be there the day of to help them if they have any questions. And then typically you would have a volunteer coordinator, someone to help, any other volunteers you're bringing in for the day. Probably won't need this in this virtual space because you won't need as many volunteers. But if you're doing something in person and having a specific person to manage all your volunteers and be that point person for the day of, we found to be really helpful. So thinking of a candidates forum, there are many different formats you can use. Some of these work better in person than virtually. And so I'll kind of recommend what we suggest for the virtual format. But moderated question and answer is that guests, your candidates who are invited, are not giving questions before the event, and they show up and the same questions are asked of candidates. You might break up sets of different questions to ask different candidates running for different office that are more based towards their specific office, and then everyone is given equal time to answer. Sometimes you can give your guests the questions beforehand and say, hey, here's 2 weeks, here's the questions that we're going to ask. You have some time to prep. That's really up to you, whether you want them to have some time to research or whether you want them more answering off the cuff. They're going to feel more comfortable having more time to research, but it's really up to your preference. Follow-up question and answer format is the same as moderated question and answer, but there are follow-up questions are permitted. So you ask a question. Each candidate has a opportunity to answer each question, and then the moderator kind of asks a follow-up question that then each off the cuff that each candidate can answer. So a little bit different. Town hall forum, the audience asks all the questions. This is a great way for direct community engagement. It can be a little nerve-wracking for hosts because you're not sure what members of the audience might ask. Members of the audience might ask very partisan questions. They might say potentially things that could be perceived as inappropriate or disrespectful to candidates. So you might want to screen some questions. You can have people pass up questions on note cards. But then again, everyone could be asking totally pertinent questions that really need to be answered by those candidates. So again, town hall format is very open dialogue, but it's up to kind of your level of comfort with that. You could always do a moderated question and answer, and at the end have a town hall format or an informal question and answer where there's more moderated questions, and then afterwards your candidates kind of mill around and talk to folks and answer questions very informally. Or you can have a section at the end where you present some questions asked by the audience. So you can mix these up a bit. These are other examples that really kind of make sense in person. I mean, the hearings is kind of like you can have experts present some concerns and then have moderators ask the experts and or candidates questions about it. You can have a set of questions given beforehand, and then and then have additional questions asked from the audience as like prepared and spontaneous debate, which is similar to kind of the Q&A with audience participation. And then you can have an informal meet and greet. And food councils have done this before. Really has to be in person. You like host a breakfast or a coffee or a lunchtime Q&A and have some type of event where you're in person mingling. Candidates are there. You could set up some tables around different themes of the food system and encourage your candidates just to talk with people about food. Doesn't quite work too well in the virtual setting, but these are just some ideas for in-person candidates forums. But again, you can be creative and set these up as long as you follow guidelines on helping them be nonpartisan. You really don't have to follow any of these, and you make it up as you go along. So I'm going to give some tips on hosting virtual forums, and then I'm going to pass it off to Matt here after I get through most of this. And a lot of this is going to be through the lens of using Zoom, because Zoom is the platform that CFSA and Community Food Strategies uses. So I apologize if this is not the platform you use, but anyone can use Zoom for 45 minutes for free. And then they have tiered pricing up from there as to different lengths and number of people who can join the platform. So just some tips, basic tips. To plug in your computer, virtual platforms drain your battery, have your charger nearby, plug in directly to your Wi-Fi when you're hosting, encourage your guests to also plug in directly to their routers when hosting, just to eliminate any Wi-Fi issues. Practice technology before you use it, like we should have done today again. Have your guests do the same. Having a team to help support the overall event is really helpful. So having someone assigned to manage the chat box. If you're using the Q&A function, which we'll talk about, have someone assigned to that, have someone to share their screen, and have others assigned to facilitate portions of your agenda. You can also broadcast your forums virtually through Facebook Live or YouTube, and we'll show you how to do that through Zoom. That's just another way to engage another audience. So you can take your Zoom and then throw it live on Facebook and have someone managing your Facebook at the same time and interacting with commenters there. And then most importantly, do not forget to record your forum so you can post it to your website later on. And hopefully Matt can drop in these links here. There's some Zoom video tutorials and information on Zoom translation breakout rooms. If you have a business account, you can set up breakout rooms and have a translator translate into a different audience, or different language, or through sign language through a specific breakout room. And then there's a link also for webinars versus meetings. And I want to mention that right now. It feels very strange for me right now to be looking at a screen, just really seeing slides and not seeing all the beautiful faces of the folks who have joined this. Typically, we use Zoom meetings for even webinars to have a space for everyone to kind of interact and talk to each other. But with a webinar, you don't see people's faces. Everyone can join. Everyone can talk in chat. You can use the Q&A function to solicit questions, but you don't see everyone's faces. And you can disable chat if you want to. So a lot of folks will probably feel a little more comfortable with having this webinar format for a candidate forum where you're bringing in candidates for office than having open video and chat from all of your audience. So, we're using the webinar format today, just acknowledging that you may want to use that when you're doing a candidate forum. We're also using it today so that we can video record this and share it easily. But we also want to acknowledge that it doesn't feel very community grounded and very engaged with people because you can't see the people in your community who are joining in. So we just want to acknowledge that that is a conundrum and we don't quite know how to move beyond that in this virtual space. So I'm going to show you some Zoom tips. This is, if you host a webinar, this is what you'll see within Zoom. On the left-hand side, you'll scroll to webinars instead of meetings. You type out your topic, your description, and then you scroll to the bottom and you need to invite your panelists. So whoever your guests are, your candidates, or whatever hosts are going to be on that you want to show their faces on the screen, you'll need to separately invite them as panelists. So here you can see the panelists here. Our maximum webinar size is 100 attendees. So with certain accounts, you can go up to 300. So you just need to know what your webinar size is and let folks know that you'll have a cutoff, and then you'll have your webinar link there to send out. So you can, people will register through Zoom there, and then you can go through email settings. If you can see that and kind of change. I'm sorry, skip the branding. In the email settings, you can change how you're interacting with folks who have registered. So you can set up reminders. You can set up follow-up. You can set up a couple of reminders, however you want to interact with everyone who has registered. So you go to email settings for that. You can also brand your webinar. So under the branding tab, you can upload a banner, you can upload a logo, you can change theme colors. So you can change it to your partner's logos, however you want to show who is hosting, or however you want to brand your webinar. You have the opportunity to do that within branding in webinar function at the bottom of the screen. There's also the Q&A function. So the Q&A is people can ask questions in the Q&A. You can see that on your screen right now. If you scroll to your screen settings, you can see the Q&A button. If you click on it, you can ask a question. And then other attendees can vote questions up. So the Q&A function could be something that you can use if you want to get questions from candidates or get questions from audience attendees. And they can ask a question, and then other attendees can vote their question up, and then that could be one of the questions that you ask of your candidates as the moderator. So just know that is a function within there. Sorry, and then the next thing is live streaming. And this is where you live stream your webinar through Facebook Live, Workplace, or YouTube. And so you have to make sure that these icons are showing here when you set up your webinar. And then once you stream your webinar, once you go to set up your webinar, go online, you have the option to click live stream via Facebook or YouTube. And then we'll go there to the live stream there. And then we just encourage you to have someone there also interacting with people if you're doing that kind of integrated live streaming. You can also control your chat access. So within forum, within webinar, you have to start the meeting, and then as the webinar host, you can go to click on chat in the meeting controls, and you can change your chat to allow attendees to chat with no one, host only, everyone publicly, or everyone publicly and privately if you want to control your chat settings of it. So these are just some tips for Zoom that we have found helpful and that we thought we would share with you all. And acknowledging that some of you all may not be using Zoom, but we found these to be helpful for us in the format that we're doing. So I think I have two more sections real fast, and we're running out of time. I'll hand it off to Matt. So just real quickly, ground rules. This is an important part of partisanship in any format, in-person or virtual. You need to ask the audience to refrain from excessive excitement for or against a particular candidate. You want folks to ask leaving partisan materials at home, and then that equal time is something that you want to lay out in your ground rules for candidates so they know they're all going to have equal time. And if you're doing something in person, it's important that literature is really left at nonpartisan voter guides or voter registration. And if you want to have a separate table outside of the room of the event for candidates to put their campaign literature or other organizations to put their literature, that is okay, but it's important that everyone knows that they're allowed to do that, and it needs to be outside of the room that the event is taking place in. So those are just some comments on ground rules. And then we have to say that partnership is so important with these. Originally CFSA was just working with RAFI on the state and federal level forum in North Carolina, but now we have so many more partners, and having so many more partners opens us up to people who have direct contacts with candidates to invite them and direct contacts with their schedulers to invite them, and really brings this overall power of network to the forefront. And when a candidate sees 2 organizations are organizing an event versus 7 organizations are organizing an event, they know that they're going to have more folks there with the more organizations are there. So we encourage you all to partner with other folks in your community to take this on. Power in numbers is really important with these types of events. Agenda, these might be different when you're in person. You want to have some time for networking, but really these agendas can be pretty simple in a virtual format. It can be a welcome, an introduction of the goals and why you're here today. Say your ground rules again. And what the agenda of the night is going to be. A big time for that forum dialogue. If you're doing an hour-and-a-half event, make it an hour for that forum dialogue, and then have 5 minutes of wrapping up and letting folks know how to connect with you. So doing this in person, you're going to have more space for networking and food together if you have time and funding. But in this virtual space, hour-and-a-half, 2 hours max is what we're recommending, and really spending as much time as possible in that the question time with the candidates. I think we're getting to Matt. Do you take over from here, Matt? Oh no, here I got 2 more to get through. So these things you don't really need to worry about right now. Your logistics are your virtual platform, but if you're in person, you really want to think about your accessibility, where you're hosting, making sure it's accessible to community, making sure it's a place that community is feeling comfortable in being in, making sure that there's childcare if possible, that there is translation if possible, that is disability accessible, and if at all possible, please provide some food as a way to build community and get people to talk and sit down together. Inviting your guests, you want to invite them as early as possible. You want to tell them who you're inviting, and you want to tell them, like I've said, the format, the agenda, and who else is going to be there. And then one more, this is my last part, and I'll hand off to Matt. I feel like I've been talking forever. Preparing the questions, some folks have, in an effort to be nonpartisan, some folks have formed specific committees to prepare questions. They've asked independent groups to prepare questions. They've asked for their network to send in questions and kind of crowdsource questions altogether. You want to show that your questions have been cultivated in a nonpartisan and independent way. Anyway, we encourage you, if you're one group hosting this, reach out to several other groups in your community to ask them what questions they would like to have there. Ask your network in a social media post or a survey, what questions they want to have asked, and then kind of cultivate from there. But you want it to be seen as nonpartisan in your questions. You want to be nonpartisan in your questions, and a way to do that is to have an independent group or to solicit questions from your network or other folks in your community. So we just want to hammer in the point here that nonpartisanship is incredibly important and needs to be embedded throughout all of your planning for this type of event. So I'm going to finally hand it over to Matt. Shut up.
All right, thanks, Jared. Thank you for shutting up. Thank you for handing me. So that should be clear. Right, we're taking it over. The next step is that you want to develop your promotion strategy. I can see we're getting a little short on time here, so I'll go ahead and try to breeze through this. We had a few questions in chat about whether or not this slide deck we made available. The answer is yes. And also this toolkit that we're going from, I pasted a link earlier in the chat to this toolkit, so feel free to follow along, or like I said, as I breeze through this, you can reference this at any point. So to develop a promotional strategy, the number one most important thing you're going to need is a media contact list. You need to have one, maybe two people be your point folks on your coalition of who's going to engage the media about this. Not every organization already has a fully fleshed out media contact list. It shouldn't be too difficult to create one. Most often through piecemeal, you probably have at least a few media contacts. Some of your partners will have some as well. And so if you just work with your partners and work with your coalition partners, you can kind of piecemeal together a full media list. You want to send out to that media list, ideally a press release about what's going to be happening. If you've never written a press release before, no worries. It's pretty straightforward. You can just Google, honestly, and it's very easy to compose. Your press release is going to contain usually like your 5 W's. It's your who, what, where, when, and why. And so you're going to be including in that press release what's going to be happening, who's going to be hosting it, like I said, the purpose of it, the details, time, location, Zoom link usually. So it's pretty straightforward. Like I said, there's a lot of helpful guides you can find online about that. But you're going to want to start thinking about this well in advance. Next slide. And this next slide is titled Create an Event Flyer. Now that we're in a time of COVID, it's probably not going to be not exclusively a physical flyer, as you could probably imagine. So when you think flyer, you could also substitute in a graphic that would be easy to read that you can post on social media that will double as a flyer. It should be concise, visually appealing, and include all the basics that went into that press release. You're also going to include somewhere on this graphic. You can also find sizing guides online. I know at my previous job, I was in charge of the social media, and we would post event photos like this, but the issue is a photo that would fit on a Facebook page is not necessarily going to fit on an Instagram page. It's going to be cropped out. The dimensions are all different. And so you don't want to have a who, what, where, when, why all inside of a graphic and then have 3 of those cut off because you didn't size it right for Instagram. So there's plenty of guides online that will give you an idea of how to size it, what the pixel sizes should be. And so this is something that, at least during the time of COVID-19, this will primarily be on social media webinar. Next up.
So, and that just I think this is a great example of a graphic because it says who it's moderated by, Charlotte NBC's Chris Clackham. Ooh, that's exciting. It's a news host. And then you see how many different candidates are there, so you know who's going to be there. So that's why it's important to get your invitations out to your candidates early so you can get some confirmed candidates so you can say that in your marketing. And then the bottom it says sponsored by, Alliance for Health, Moms Rising, Toxic Free & C, Community Food Strategies, Play the Union, all these folks in addition to the Charlotte Mecklenburg Food Policy Council. So you see that and you're like, wow, look at all these people. So I think this is just such a good example of a great flyer. All right, I'll move on.
All right, now next up under develop a promotion strategy, you're going to want to send out your save the dates. Now, we've all gotten save the dates for things like weddings and for graduations and other events, but this save the date, again, it's not going to be as formal as a press release. Essentially, it's just going to have the purpose of what's happening and then a date. And this is going to be going out to all of your network contacts via email, via social media. This is going to be one of the first things that goes out. And get creative. Again, just because you're posting on social media doesn't mean you can't necessarily post it in coffee shops, in restaurants, at community functions, things like that. So if you've got co-sponsors for the event, they should have an idea of where they want to post it. So you want cross-promotion involved here. Again, in addition to media lists, you've probably already built up your own either membership lists or communication lists, newsletter lists, things like that. Among everybody in your coalition. So make sure everybody pulls their weight. Everybody sends this out. There's going to be a lot of overlap, but not as much as you may think. So everyone's got their niche market that they appeal to. This box on the right is really useful because you want to think outside the box. As a group, you want to brainstorm other agricultural organizations, food distributors, restaurant owners. Again, this is food policy. This affects restaurant owners just as much as anybody else. So have them promote it. The faith community, conservation groups. So really just think outside the box here. And most importantly, utilize direct connections. So if you know somebody in your community that you work with on a regular basis and they know you and you know them, you want to appeal to them. By the same token, if there's somebody in your community that one of your partner organizations works with on a more routine basis, reach out to your partner organization and have them make that direct ask, because the fewer degrees of separation between you and the person you're trying to recruit, the better. So that's going to be really useful when it comes to trying to make these direct personal appeals. All right, next slide. All right, there we go. So you're going to want to follow up with your guests. Again, all right, this is before your webinar, before your candidate forum. You should be confirming as far out as possible who all is going to be attending this thing in terms of panelists. You want as much open communication as possible. The last thing you want is anybody who's at least had a verbal commitment. You don't want them to bail out at the last minute as far as you can control it. You don't want the event to sneak up on them. They should have no surprises there. So you generally should have at least 2 candidates from a specific race, unless the candidate attending your forum is running unopposed, at which point it's still good to hold it. It's still good to get them to discuss these issues. There's a lot you're going to want to request from them. So a short biography you can post just so that you can introduce them when you're there. Notify them about the time, things like that. But again, as you'll see here, this is more related to in-person candidate forums. They're not going to need directions on how to get to the Zoom webinar. All right, now, in advance of the event, you're going to want to track your success and then evaluate. Ideally, this will not be the only event of this nature that you're going to host. So tracking different metrics is going to plan for future events. And also, if you're applying for grants, this will be a great example of things you can include in terms of metrics. So before the event, create a Google Doc, something like that, to kind of keep track of things like how many volunteers helped out, number of new media contacts, have someone track the number of stories, how much coverage you got after the event was over, track how many registrants you had, how many people actually showed up, things like that. If it's a food council, how many applications were submitted to join the new food council. So you're going to want to have all this framework in place in advance, so you're not scrambling to track stuff after it's over. It should just be, drag and drop, plug and play. Next up. All right, now the event's gone off without a hitch. Everything went wonderful. What now? Well, in the aftermath of your event, there's a few key steps you're going to want to not neglect. First, you're going to want to send thank you notes to everybody who participated as a panelist. Let them know that you appreciated it, that this was a successful event. It wouldn't have been so without their support and their help and their attendance. Because ideally, if these are candidates for an election, someone's going to win. And it will be helpful if you and your organizations had a good relationship with whoever wins that election. Let's see what else. Guest coordinator, whoever else was involved in terms of the coalitions, you want to reach out to them and thank them for all of the individual work they did. Again, you want to maintain these relationships because this will not be your only event. If you got some coverage of the event, but you want more, try to write a letter to the editor, write an opinion piece, get out there and talk a little bit about the significance of the event and some of the stuff that took place and was covered in it. And then last but not least, thank the media. If they are fortunate enough to cover your event and you get some good coverage out of it, reach out to them. Let them know that it didn't go unnoticed. All right, next up. All right, now, arguably the most important step here after the event is you want to continue to engage. You should be building on your success to make sure that you stay relevant. These issues stay relevant. You want to update your high-level food system stakeholders on issues relevant to your food council. Things will change, priorities will change in terms of policy, that is. So you want to make sure everyone's in the loop. And it'll be even better if you're able to get some of these stories, these success stories from this event and then share them. Keep your elected officials up to date on your food council's activities. If everything went off without a hitch, this is something that they should be glad they participated in, and you've now got a hotline to these elected officials. Send them any news stories you find relevant. Send them your reports. CFSA, we just published some survey results on some of our farms who have been hit very hard through COVID-19. It's something like 87% of farms that responded have seen a revenue loss since COVID-19 began. We published that report and we've shared it with anybody and everybody who's a policymaker who we work with, because this is important for them to know. We're an organization that has a hotline to our members, and we can show you where they're hurting, where they need help at. And so this is just one example of the pipeline, the information pipeline you'll get out of hosting events like these.
All right, so I'll speak just real quickly about hosting food forums. So let's say that you want to do an event. Maybe you sent invites to candidates, but no one was able to come. You can still hold an important event that makes an impact in your community. So you can still elevate the issues that you want to elevate. You can still inform community members about issues related to food and ag and how they can get involved in policy work around that. So there's a few different things you could do. You could ask candidates, well, maybe they can't come to your particular event, but maybe they could send in a written statement or a video. That would be great. You could also assemble a panel of local farmers or producers to share about their experience in the food system, or assemble a panel of advocates to share about how they advocate for policies within the food system. And you can also invite some experts to speak about their knowledge related to the food system. There's a link on this slide that links to a food solutions forum toolkit. This is an event that was held in New Hampshire this past November. So they invited several presidential candidates in preparation for the New Hampshire primary that was going to happen. Most candidates weren't able to come, and so they did what I'm describing. They did this instead. They had panels of farmers and advocates and experts sharing about the food system in New Hampshire. And so this is something that you can do in your local community if you're not able to get candidates to come.
Thanks, Michelle. And I think an important thing to note with this is, if candidates don't feel comfortable coming to a candidate forum, or they're not willing to commit, and you go this route of, doing a food themed forum around the election, you can always reach back out to invite them as a guest. And maybe they will, and it's a little bit hard in that virtual format, but in person, they might show up as a guest, and then that could create some opportunity for your community to have dialogue with them and for them to speak with folks. So we just want to reiterate that you don't have to have candidates there to do these types of events. And food councils across North Carolina have hosted food forums, and South Carolina have hosted food forums as a way to create that community voice around, what is happening in food in their community and what they want to see. So I'm going to exit so this is our contact information. So please contact any of us. And again, if you're in North or South Carolina, if you're interested in hosting your own local forum, if you just want to talk about candidates forums and you're anywhere, we'll love to get on the phone with you. We'd love to chat with anyone who's hosting these types of events, especially as we are hosting a couple of our own this year. I'm going to stop the screen share and then just see if there are any questions from folks. Matt or Michelle, have y'all seen any questions in the chat that we should cover? I know we're a little bit over time.
Someone asked about, do you host these every year or just with major election cycles?
So we've only hosted these webinars to feature the toolkit. I think we did it between the 2 years ago and then in 2016. So we're going to be updating this toolkit with a new, how to do this virtually section that we've included in here. And every year we kind of push the toolkit out to our network in North Carolina specifically and say, hey, is anyone interested in hosting one of these? And sometimes we get takers. We do not host these events. This is the first time that CFSA is working with RAFI and other partners to host this type of event at the state and federal level. So that is a first for us.
And would you recommend that food councils hold these events at any time or specifically focused around elections?
So I'd say anytime. We have numerous community groups that have done this anytime, especially as like people are interested in forming a local food council or they have a new food council that's about to launch. They've kind of hosted them as a way to say, hey, like we're trying to create a cross-sector community conversation around food. And they've hosted these kind of like events where people sit down and eat and like talk about that and like see what they want to get out of that, or they join the food council. And Columbia, South Carolina, they went through a very detailed process where like they paid community members to design the process. They paid community members to lead part of the process. They gave out free food to people to participate in the process. So, I mean, there's some really, equitable ways to do these events where you're doing some deep and community engagement. And I'd say, around election time, it's just a great way to bring attention to it because it is so pertinent. You watched that video from 2016 and you didn't really hear anything about the food system in 2016. Times have changed. And with COVID, that is not the case. And the food system is very much so at the forefront of a lot of people's minds. And so I think, you're going to have a lot of more interest from candidates who want to talk in this discussion as opposed to, maybe 4 years ago. Any other questions or concerns or feedback? Has anyone hosted one of these themselves? You want to drop in any comment in the box? We're running out of time, but this is why we don't like the webinar format, because we want to see y'all, talk with y'all. Okay, well, we really appreciate you all being here today. Community Food Strategies really thanks, CFSA and RAFI for being a partner on this. We just really appreciate collaboration to support these community events. And please, again, reach out to us if you're interested in hosting one of these on your own or you just want to talk more. And we will hopefully see you all soon. Bye, everybody.